All right, so let's find all of the transformations of this trigonometric graph. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the midline, because if we draw the midline on there, that gives us a nice 0, 0 part. So the midline goes in the middle. So there's the highest part of the graph is here. So I'm going to look at the highest part, and the lowest part is here. That is my entire range of the graph. So it goes from -1 up to 5, which means right here is going to be the midline, which is right in the middle. So the equation, and I can check that, from here I go up 1, 2, 3, and from the midline I go down 1, 2, 3, so it's right in the middle. So that equation, we write the midline as an equation, is y equals 2. Then we're going to look at the amplitude. The amplitude is the height. So the amplitude is the height from the midline. So as we already counted before, we see that amplitude, or that height, is going to be 3. And if we had large numbers or we weren't really sure, you could actually take on the y-axis the low point and the high point. So the high point is 5. And how far are you going? You're going down to -1, right? So you're going to go 5 all the way down to -1. So it's really like +1. And that's going to give you a distance of 6. And you know that's been cut in half. So that's going to be 3. And again, we subtracted a -1 or added 1 because we're going from here down to here. Now the period. The period is the actual length of the function from start to finish. So when the cycle starts repeating. So if we could just pick a point, let's pick a point here because it's a nice lattice point. If we go up, back to the middle, down, back up to here before we start again. So we notice that distance is 9. We end at 9 and we began at 1. So that means we have 9 minus 1, which is 8. So the period is actually 8. Now, we're going to write the equation, which we are. We don't need the period, we need the b. So we're going to need this equation right here, because if you notice, the b is in the equation. So the period is 8. But we need the b. So 2 pi over b is the period, and the period is 8. Now we solve for b. You can put 8 over 1 if that helps you. And so we have 8b equals 2 pi, and divide both sides by 8. So b equals pi over 4. Now, I left the phase shift for last because it's kind of the hardest part, depending on if you're writing a sine or a cosine equation. We're going to write both. But right now, let's look and see. We have sine and cosine. So sine, from the midline, sine starts at 0, 0. And if you're looking at midline, cosine's up at 1. So let's do the sine function first. So the sine function, here's the midline. It hits 0, 0 right here. So if that were down and shifted, here's our new start point. And then our sine curve looks like this. And that means it has been shifted over 1. So the phase shift is +1. Now that we have all of this information, we can write a sine equation. And that would be y equals, what is the amplitude? 3. And then sine. And now we know our b, which is pi over 4. And we have to have our parentheses because that keeps the phase shift correct. X minus 1 plus k, which is 2. And that is our sine equation. If we needed a cosine equation, which we do, the amplitude doesn't change. It's cosine. Since it's the same graph, the period will also stay the same. So will the b stay the same? And the 2. So when you go from a sine to a cosine, they're actually the same graph. It's just been shifted. And I'm going to show you what that means. So we have an x, and we need to look for the cosine. So if you look at the cosine graph, the little one I have here, at the midline, cosine is up at 1. So it's going to be up here at 1. So we're going to go to the midline, and we're going to go to the first place. It's all the way at the very top of the function. And it's not, boom, it is right there. Here's the top of the function. And so the cosine would look like that. And so as you notice now, the cosine has been shifted 3. So the phase shift for sine is 1. But for cosine, it's going to be a phase shift of 3. So x minus 3.